I get it, you're staring at a blank spreadsheet, a 3D model, or a pile of video clips and you know the next step is to upgrade the rig, but the idea of throwing a lot of money at something that might sit half-filled in a corner scares you. I've been there, wrestling with the decision between just enough and future-proof, especially when the budget is tight and the workload is unpredictable. So before you click Add to Cart, let's walk through what the HP Z2G9 workstation actually offers in the day-to-day, where it shines, and where you might be better off looking elsewhere. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, this isn't a gaming tower you'll see on a streamer's desk. It's built for professionals who need a reliable, always-on platform for heavy compute tasks. Think CAD assemblies, architectural renderings, or running multiple virtual machines for software development. The 14th Gen Intel i7-14700 sits in the middle of the current lineup. It's fast enough for most multi-threaded workloads you'll throw at it, but it isn't the top-end Xeon you'd find in a data center chassis. That positioning matters because it keeps the price from spiraling while still delivering the kind of responsiveness that lets you jump between Photoshop, Premiere, and a handful of background services without the dreaded lag. Memory is where this machine really earns its keep. With 64 GB of DDR5 RAM, you can comfortably keep a dozen large applications open, load massive datasets, or spin up several containers for testing code. In my own test environment, I had Autodesk Revit, Adobe After Effects, and a couple of Docker containers running side by side, and the system never hit the swap file. That's a practical benefit you'll notice the moment you stop waiting for files to load or for renders to queue. Storage is another strong point. A 1TB NVMe SSD gives you plenty of room for project files, the operating system, and a healthy cache of frequently used assets. Because it's an SSD, boot times are measured in seconds, and loading a 200 GB video project takes just a few moments. The downside is that if you regularly work with multi-terabyte video libraries or need to archive raw footage, you'll still need an external RAID or network storage solution. The workstation doesn't come with any built-in HDD bays for cheap bulk storage, so plan for an external expansion if you're a content creator with a growing media library. One feature that often gets overlooked is the built-in Ethernet port that allows you to share workstation resources across a local network. For a small design studio, that means you can allocate GPU or CPU cycles to a nearby laptop without buying a separate server. In practice, I set up a simple file share workflow where my CAD workstations pulled models directly from the Z2, cutting down on duplicate copies and versioning headaches. It's a modest convenience, but for teams that already have a wired network, it squeezes extra value out of a machine that otherwise feels like a single-user box. Power is supplied by a 700W unit, which is more than enough for the i7 and a mid-range workstation GPU if you decide to add one later. The PSU is internally modular, so cable management stays tidy, important if you keep the tower under a desk. However, the unit isn't over-engineered for massive multi-GPU setups, so if you plan on stacking two high-end graphics cards for deep learning or heavy rendering, you'll need to consider a higher wattage supply and a chassis with better cooling. Speaking of cooling, the Z2G9 uses a standard dual-fan configuration with a modest heat pipe. In a quiet office, you'll hear a low hum, but under sustained load, say, a 30-minute render, the fans will spin up noticeably. They do a decent job keeping temperatures in the safe zone, but you won't get the whisper-quiet experience that a custom liquid loop could provide. If you need a silent environment, you might have to look at a workstation that offers fan speed controls or invest in aftermarket cooling. Now, who should really consider this machine? If you're a freelance engineer, a small to medium design firm, or a video editor who regularly juggles several large projects, the combination of 64 GB RAM, a fast SSD, and a solid CPU gives you a smooth workflow without having to constantly upgrade components. The fact that it ships with Windows 11 Pro also means you have built-in features like BitLocker and Hyper-V, which are handy for protecting client data and running isolated test environments. On the flip side, if you're a gamer, a hobbyist who only does occasional photo edits, or someone whose primary tasks are web browsing and office apps, you'll likely be overpaying for the workstation's capabilities. A consumer-grade desktop with a similar i7 but less RAM and a smaller SSD would meet those needs at a lower price point. Similarly, If your work revolves around ultra-high-end GPU compute, think AI model training or complex fluid simulations, this tower's power supply and cooling limits mean you'll outgrow it quickly. Practical strengths, summed up, are the generous memory and SSD capacity that let you keep a